All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Soul Protocol. This is Inner Architecture for Changemakers. What do you think of my new tagline? I think I used to say, what did I say? Welcome to Soul Protocol, your home for the inner revolution, which I also like. So if you have a preference, I would love to hear about it in the comments because I'm curious what you think. But I really like this inner architecture for changemakers. This was a phrase that I had coined originally for my website because I wanted to kind of specify that what I'm doing here on Soul Protocol and in all of my coaching work is helping people to do the inner work that I believe is so important for going out into the world and showing up just a little bit differently so that we can impact the world in a more positive way. I believe positive impacts have far reaching consequences, just like negative impacts do. And that when we cultivate more patience, kindness, tolerance, when we dream bigger, when we act more courageously, that has sort of a contagious effect on the people around us. In other words, and this brings me right into our topic for today, I believe that we are all change makers. And if something inside of you just objected to hearing that, if something inside of you was kind of like, yeah, no, not me. I'm not a change maker. No, I'm just like a normal person who's trying to navigate life and might maybe even just survive right now. I feel you, first of all. I think I spent the first 6 years of my children's lives feeling like I was in survival mode. And certainly after my divorce, it like restarted and there was like a resurgence of survival mode. But what I've come to understand now is that all of the inner work that we're doing, even when we feel like we're just barely getting by, even when we feel like we're just surviving, is really impactful work. And whether or not we notice it in the moment, it does actually, literally, change the world. And this, to me, is undeniable now. Okay, so if you objected when I said that you're a change maker, I'm going to challenge you with two pieces of evidence really quick. The first one is that inner work, the inner work you're showing up to do here, just by listening to this podcast, creates change inside of us. So having done your inner work or not done your inner work is the difference between, being cut off in traffic and reacting like a maniac versus reacting in a way that's calm, cool, and compassionate. Right? Do you fly off the handle and assume that this person is obviously trying to insult you? Or do you make a different assumption, like maybe this person is late to work, maybe they're late to an interview or something really important, maybe they're having a medical emergency. Maybe they were listening to their music and they just simply didn't see me and it was an honest mistake. There's a million reasons that someone might cut me off in traffic other than intentionally trying to insult a stranger. So that inner experience, that shift between, okay, I went from being someone who was easily agitated, easily insulted, who felt pretty raw in the world, pretty fragile, really, to, okay, now I have greater resilience, I have greater patience, I have greater compassion. That change is palpable inside of us. If we are not going to do this work for any other reason, let it be for the reason that we're going to be happier. But the second piece of irrefutable evidence that this is change-making work is that when we have that control over our reaction to the world, we show up very, very differently. We have a feeling of greater agency. We have a sense that I can do this. This is my life. I get to build this. I get to create my reality. And we can act in ways that are more courageous and more kind, more peaceful, more audacious sometimes. Maybe that's what's called for. And this action creates a chain reaction of positive impacts, like ripples on water. We only have to touch the water a tiny little bit. You barely have to make any effort at all to have an impact that can move out over the surface of an entire lake. And when we understand the power of these chain reactions, we can relieve ourselves of some of the obligation of having to go out in the world and take huge action every single day, because sometimes that's intimidating. It doesn't make sense to go out into the world and try to change the entire world every day. Oh my God. Give me a break. It's hard enough for me to keep my children alive and myself, try to feed us nourishing food, and get to the gym every day. But if I believe that I can take a very small action and then walk away and trust that those ripples will keep moving, now I've recognized the true, full capacity of my power as a positive change maker. So there was a really interesting study that I wanted to talk about. It's called the Farmington Heart Study. I believe this was done at Harvard. And they actually studied almost 5,000 people, I think around 4,700 people over the course of 20 years, to see whether happiness would be contagious. They basically mapped out all of the people that they studied to understand how happiness was distributed. Like, was it distributed sporadically, randomly? What they found is that it's actually distributed in clusters. So unhappy people tend to cluster together, and happy people tend to cluster together. And this is important because what it shows us is that the quality of our experience of life, our happiness. I hate the word happiness. Happiness studies, I struggle with it because I don't think it's a very clearly defined experience. But I digress. As our happiness is expressed, we will help others around us to be happier. Or as our unhappiness is expressed, we will facilitate the unhappiness of others around us as well. That's how these clusters form. And the study clearly showed a map where clusters of happy and unhappy people were gathered. There was another study with a sort of similar objective to it. It wanted to study how widespread the impact of happiness was. And what they discovered in this was, I write it down, hold on. This was Nicholas A. Christakis. I'm so sorry, Nicholas, if I'm pronouncing your last name wrong. And James Fowler. Pretty sure I got that one right. They discovered in their research that happiness impacts the network out to 3 degrees of separation, which says that your friend's happiness impacts you, but also your friend's friend's happiness and your friend's 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 happiness. So if you've ever heard the stat that you're the average of the 5 people you choose to spend time with, first of all, true. Secondly, anecdotally, at least, I can attest to that in my own life. Secondly, can we see a study somewhere? I'm just curious. But also what it means is that, and what all 3 of these, the 2 studies and this arbitrary stat, mean is that it matters who we put ourselves in proximity to. And if it matters who we choose to be in proximity to, it matters how we show up, because we are in proximity to other people. We do certainly impact the others around us. And this is what makes us change makers. Now, the work here is not to force happiness in order to have a positive impact on people around us. And this is why I don't like the word happiness, because positive impact is not always about showing up with a smile on our face. It's about showing up authentically, right? It's about showing up and saying, maybe without griping or complaining, but just stating the truth. I'm having a hard day, if you're having a hard day. Or, this thing happened, it made me feel really sad. It matters that we show up authentically because it gives the people around us permission to do the same thing. But also gives people around us the opportunity to know who we really are. So I want to just throw that out there so that it's clear that we are not talking about just showing up with a perpetual smile. That doesn't really do anyone any good. Of course, if you're actually joyful, you can share it. That's abundance that can be shared. But showing up for the benefit of the network that we find ourselves part of is more about showing up authentically. And that authentic presentation is what makes the most change. So I've got a 3-step protocol for you today. 3 different exercises that you can use to reassign your identity as a change maker. Because I believe that's important. I think identity is important. On the one hand, you can play with it. Case in point. On the other hand, when we tell ourselves stories about our identity, they tend to stick psychologically. And we should be careful about the sticky stories that we choose to believe. And if we choose to, we can believe positive sticky stories. So my first step in the protocol for you today is called micro identity naming. So you're going to take on a new identity, but just for the day. Today I am someone who ... Today I am someone who helps people. Today I am someone who has a killer work ethic. Today I am someone who drinks 75 ounces of water. Well, it's 75 if you live in Colorado. It might be less if you live anywhere that doesn't suck the water right out of your skin. Today I am someone who could do something great someday, right? So this is another really fun one to play with. What is the great thing that you'd like to become someday? I want to become the president of the United States. I want to become an astronaut. I want to become, these are the things that come to my mind because my psyche is an 8-year-old child. I want to grow up and be a lion tamer. So cool. What you can do is say, today, I am a lion tamer in training. I'm going to do the things today that a lion tamer in training would do. And suddenly, you do it today, you do it again tomorrow, you do it again the next day. You're finding that you're becoming a lion tamer. So this is a really fun way to help your mind believe that you are indeed the thing that you desire to become. That present tense statement, today I am someone who, is much more effective for our psychology and much more durable than a future tense or goal-oriented statement. Because when we say something as a future tense statement, we say, someday I'm going to be a lion tamer. It feels distant, and it feels like something that we could fail at. Like, will I be a lion tamer someday? I don't know. That sounds like a very lofty goal for someone who doesn't know anything about lions. But when I state it as a present statement, now I've given myself power to take the action that I can take today and claim the identity of that person who's taking action today. So play around with that one a little bit. Step 2 in the protocol is to initiate a ripple. So this is going back to that analogy of maybe dropping a pebble in a lake, and then the ripples go out across the entire surface. Choose one person who you could positively impact with one small action that would take you less than 5 minutes to complete. Do the action and then walk away. and walk away knowing that you have just started a ripple in the lake. Walk away knowing and having faith that the action you took today mattered, that that action is going to be transcribed into future positive reactions that will travel across the network of your community and maybe even further than that. All right, step 3 in the protocol is to ask for a story. So go to someone close to you and ask them for a specific story of how a small gesture once impacted them positively. These stories can be so important for getting our mind on board with the program because the mind uses language to look for evidence. And when it has evidence, it's compelled. When it doesn't have evidence, it won't believe something. Or if the evidence is wordless, really hard to get the mind on board with those. Right? Oh, I just have a sort of nameless feeling. Well, if you name the feeling, the mind can say, oh, that's what that is. And now it has the evidence it needs. So when we're looking for evidence that small impacts make a big difference, asking people we know and love will have a positive impact on our mind. And the more of those stories we collect, the more evidence our mind has to believe, yes, this is true. And if it's true that all of these people I know were impacted by small gestures, then it must be true that when I go out into the world and make a small gesture, that creates impact as well. All right, everybody, I'm going to wrap up there. I hope that this soul protocol helped to inspire you to maybe initiate a positive ripple in the world. And if it did, would you consider giving me a 5-star rating on this podcast? Every rating, comment, follow makes such a huge difference, especially at the early stages of the game. If you have feedback for me, I'd love to hear that too. You can leave it in the comments below, and I do respond to those. Thank you so much for being here. If you want more great content, you can subscribe to my newsletter at evithq.com. And I love you all tremendously, and I will see you all next week.